D. Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, Willie Donick, and David Janes here with you. We are proudly presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. And I'm here to tell all of you, I believe it was Barry Manilow who said, I made it through the rain. Maybe not today because it's raining a lot, but you made it through the metaphorical rain because NFL Draft Week is here. It's been more than 100 days, 3+ months since the Tennessee Titans lost their final game of the regular season and clinched the number 1 pick in the NFL Draft. We've spent countless hours dissecting the draft, the players in the draft, one player in particular, that of course being Cam Ward. We've broken down his flaws. We've broken down his best traits. We've talked about how he compares to other quarterbacks who have been taken number 1 overall. But in 3 days' time, it is expected that Cam Ward will be the number 1 pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. So here's how I want to start today. And I want all of you to participate. I encourage your participation.
What is your favorite Barry Manilow song? That was impressive, by the way. Guy at Adam's age pulling out a Barry Manilow reference
At the
right
Copa.
No, let's not go there. Don't get that. That is no. We don't want that in our head.
All right, sorry.
It's in it now.
A nice ballad from Barry Manilow, not too bad.
It's in your head now.
Now I'm all shook. All right. This is what I want to know from all of you at 615-737-1025. I'm taking a Cam Ward temperature check. How are you feeling about Cam Ward and the Titans probably taking Cam Ward as round 1 of the draft nears? Again, 3 days away. And we are all expecting, barring something completely unforeseen, that Cam Ward will be the number 1 pick in the draft. How are you feeling about that as we finally get there? Have your feelings changed on him between January and now? Are you more positive about Cam Ward? Are you feeling more negative about Cam Ward? I want to know how you feel because draft week is here. 615-737-1025. And while we await your responses, I'm going to ask that very same question to the gentleman to my right. So, Derek, Cam Ward temperature check. How are you feeling about him as round 1 of the draft approaches in 3 days?
I feel good about the pick. I think they are doing the things necessary to try to improve this team in lieu of them drafting a quarterback. So I think they've done a good job at trying to fix the offensive line. Now, again, we thought they were fixing the offensive line somewhat last year, and it didn't go quite as well. Yeah, there were some improvements, but yet and still they were considered one of the worst offensive lines in the National Football League. But bringing in Kevin Zeitler, Lloyd Cushenberry coming back, going to get Dan Moore, putting J.C. Latham more at his possibly natural position at right tackle. So now the one thing you have to have for a young quarterback to even thrive is a good offensive line. So I think they're doing the things necessary from an offensive line standpoint. Obviously, we know they still need pass catchers. I think Van Jefferson will be a good number 3 for them. Hey, if Treylon Burks gives you something, he gives you something. But you need to go out there and find a guy that could potentially go with your number 1 pick in Cam Ward. So I feel good right now about the Titans drafting Cam Ward in the situation he's coming into. If this was last year, I'm not sure I would be feeling this way.
Willie, same question.
I've been consistent all along. I don't think that Cam Ward is the ideal first overall pick, but based on the unique circumstances of this year, which every year is a little bit different, and I think you could argue this isn't the perfect storm to have the first pick. If you're going to have the first pick, you'd love for Shaquille O'Neal to be, somebody like that, the obvious first guy to just take all the decision-making out of it. That's our guy. Let's start printing the jerseys right now and get a leg up on sales. I mean, sometimes it's that easy, right? Sometimes it is. But I think I am okay with them doing it if they truly believe that he's got a high floor, and even if he's not the end all be all, which is again what we've discussed a lot. We've hit all of this.
Mm-hmm.
We had a great debate with Jared the one day about Paul Kuharsky's "What if this were the ceiling?"
Mm-hmm.
So I think if your expectations are realistic, then I'm okay with the pick. If your expectation is the first pick in the draft has to be a superstar, then I think we're be prepared to be disappointed.
But can't you say that that's probably where a lot of the fan base sit? That if you got the number one pick and you're drafting him number one overall, then there's an expectation. Whether the Titans put that expectation on him or not, there's still going to be this outside expectation of, him coming in and him doing what Jaden Daniels did, him doing what CJ Stroud did.
Oh yeah,
Him doing what some of these young quarterbacks have done. There's still going to be that.
That's going to happen.
But the Titans,
and Cam Ward is going to have to deal with that, and the Titans are going to have to deal with that.
But that's something that I think the Titans, they need to make this very clear on the front end. Once they do draft him, I think there needs to be a message that goes out saying this is going to be a process. Because if you don't, I don't think if you jump ahead of it, you can't then, try to catch up to it once the narrative is out.
Yeah. So sometimes the first pick in the draft, who is a quarterback, is Peyton Manning. Sometimes it's Troy Aikman. Sometimes it's Andrew Luck. But sometimes it's Jamarcus Russell. Sometimes it's Drew Bledsoe. Sometimes, you see what I'm saying? It's if you understand that, then I think you're okay. But fans don't understand that. Fans will ignore the history and realize and don't always realize that the first pick in the draft, who is a quarterback, can be anywhere on the spectrum from total bust to Hall of Famer and everything in between. But Cam Ward's grades do not set him apart to where you think there's a chance that he's Peyton Manning. But if he ends up being Drew Bledsoe or Baker Mayfield or somebody in the middle of that spectrum, that's still a pretty darn good quarterback. If it's a guy they want to sign to the second contract, we're getting way ahead of ourselves here, but I think we have to temper expectations as we wrap our arms around this pick, if that's where they go.
By the way, the odds of Cam Ward being the number one overall pick, according to FanDuel Sportsbook, minus 20,000. Now, I'm not a betting man, so I don't know how much you have to bet to actually make something off of that, but minus 20,000. Cam Ward is the overwhelming favorite to be the number one overall pick. Abdul Carter at plus 3,000, Travis Hunter at plus 5,000, Shedeur Sanders at plus 6,500, Jackson Dart at plus 15,000. So overwhelmingly, Cam Ward is expected to be the number one overall pick. And I was reading this article over the weekend in Sports Illustrated by Connor Orr about quarterbacks. And he posed a prompt to nearly 24 former pro quarterbacks, current and former NFL coaches and executives, high-level NFL quarterback trainers, and agents of quarterbacks. If they had a child poised to be the number one pick but could game the draft in their favor, which team would they choose and why? Or allowed each participant to give 3 teams as their answer. And of course, they were granted anonymity so they could speak more freely on the matter. And the results were interesting. One person did pick the Titans. And here was the quote that person gave. And Orr was quick to point out that the person who picked the Titans was not connected to the franchise in any meaningful way. Quote, "It's bad for a young quarterback to be in a big market. See Zach Wilson, of course, the Jets' number 2 overall pick in 2021. A lesser media market is better for a young quarterback, and the new GM there is good and should get it right." So we don't think of ourselves as a lesser media market. We think we're a great media market. But compared to New York and Boston and other major cities, we're not on that level from a population standpoint. Do you buy into a quote-unquote lesser media market being a good thing for Cam Ward?
I think it doesn't. On one hand, yes, it does hurt, but there can be some benefit to not being in a big market because everything you do isn't scrutinized nationally. If you are the number one pick and you're going to New York, LA, Chicago, Florida, possibly, Vegas, they're going to talk about you, Detroit, they're going to talk about you a lot more. it's going to be national, more so of a national thing than not. But if you go to places like Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's a nice size city, but you go to places like Cincinnati, maybe even Cleveland, some of these up Jacksonville, some of these other franchises where you can sort of, stay tucked away for a while and the heat is not ramped up as much. It's almost like, unless locally they really, get on you, it's like they allow you to an extent to sort of grow into, who you're going to be as a quarterback, or there needs to be more. They need to see more in order for this thing to kind of become national news. Because you look at Will Levis, he wasn't even a first rounder, and it didn't become national news until when he started doing some of these
Right.
boneheaded things. And then obviously with Brian Callahan throwing up his hands.
The Mayo Cologne.
The Mayo. But Brian Callahan throwing up his hands in the middle of a game, toward the end of the game.
What the bleep are you
Exactly.
doing?
That brings attention too. But if he was just a bad quarterback and not doing something, no one would pay attention.
It's all relative for
Yeah.
sure. The heat of the microscope that you're under when you're with a New York team, Dallas,
Dallas too,
even a Green Bay, a
Mhm.
team that has the national following that some of the teams have, a
Mhm.
cross section of the teams have. I would say though that in the NFL, you only play 16 games, and it's such a big audience that's watching that even in the smallest market, and I would say Nashville is among the smallest markets, right? It's in the bottom
Mhm.
10 for sure. And you mentioned Cleveland
Mhm.
and Cincinnati. You're still under a microscope
Yeah.
at quarterback, right? So I don't think you can escape it, even if you're in a smaller market.
I think
We're gonna pick
because-
apart his game like you can't even believe. I remember Vince Young. I remember Jake Locker. I remember Marcus Mariota, Steve McNair. And it was very, very new. It was a new market when Steve McNair came in. And the whole dynamic of Steve McNair, who ended up being borderline Hall of Fame,
Mhm.
he got picked through the microscope early on. When it was the Oilers and the
Mhm.
team didn't have the big identity,
but it wasn't.
there was a lot of, is he
but
going to make it?
But it wasn't from a national standpoint. Look at Trevor Lawrence. He's a prime example.
It was definitely not for a national standpoint. You're absolutely right.
if
The national thing is a
plays-
whole nother stratosphere.
Exactly. If Trevor Lawrence plays the way he has been playing in New York,
Oh, boy.
LA, places like Dallas, they would,
Chicago.
they would have
Shredded.
He would have been shredded each and every week. But because it's Jacksonville, he gets some of it, but it's not in the manner that maybe a number one pick in a bigger city would get.
But he's also, if we're using Jacksonville as an example, the Jaguars are the only game in town, right? That's the only team that city has
In Major League Sports,
in
no
Major
doubt.
League
Yeah.
Sports. So that adds to it as well. By the way, the results of this poll conducted by Connor Orr, most desirable landing spots, the Rams were number one by a wide margin with 14. A lot of confidence in Sean McVay. The Steelers were 2 at 9. The Vikings were 3 with 8 votes. The Packers and Ravens and Chiefs were tied with 5 votes each. There was another quote in this article that I found to be really interesting by Connor Orr, just talking about the changes in how quarterbacks are perceived today versus back when. One NFL offensive position coach said this, quote, "The scariest thing these days are when a young quarterback goes to a bad team with a new head coach. It's difficult to succeed. Quarterbacks need time to develop, and the public and owners just shred them now. The days of time to develop are gone. You have to win now, and the quarterback and head coach are first to get destroyed. Think if Peyton Manning or Jim Kelly or Troy Aikman had the records they had to start off in this environment."
It's a great point. Jimmy Johnson was the coach, and Troy Aikman was the quarterback. And they were, I think, 1-15 the first year. I have to go back and double check, but I'm almost positive that was what happened. And it looked awful. But I think back then there was a sense of, well, yeah, they were going to be awful. And then they, I think, jumped up to something like 7-9 the
Mhm.
next year. Aikman got hurt at the end of the year, or else they might have snuck in maybe as a wild card. And then obviously they got
Better,
unbelievably
yes.
good right after that. But can you imagine the talk of, well, I don't know if Jimmy Johnson can be an NFL coach. Now, I'm sure they probably had that down in Dallas, but nationally, from where I was sitting, wherever I was back then, I guess I was coming into college, I didn't think anything of it. It was like, well, yeah, it's going to take a couple years for Dallas to get good.
Peyton Manning famously went 3-13
Led the league in
in
interceptions.
his rookie season. Now, I don't pretend to know what the media coverage was like about that in 1998, but I can't imagine it's anywhere close to what would have happened to Peyton Manning, like that quote said, if he went 3-13 in his rookie season in 2025.
Yeah, it's hard to, in there was more leeway back then because it was all about having these, these quarterbacks when they got drafted, they were drafted into longer term contracts. So you can sit them for 2-3 years and still have 4 years left to develop the guy before he gets to a contract. So you were allowed as a quarterback sort of to grow into who you were going to be. And, it's not like that anymore. It's 1-2 years. And if you don't show us within that 2 years, if you're first pick, we maybe give you that third year. But if you're not showing it, then we're looking to move on. We don't have time to waste with you, nor do we have time to waste with definitely the head coach.
But the team can be bad and the quarterback look good. I would point to Drake
Yeah.
May this year for New England. I think they saw some good things. They were like, hey, I think we've got something in Drake May, even though the team was awful. Peyton Manning, I think for sure, he led the league in interceptions, but I think you could tell that he was going to be good. He was going to be good. And of course, the next year, they made a huge jump, and you guys had to take him out in Indianapolis in the playoffs.
Yes,
but he made a jump from 3-13 to playoff team in 1 year. But you could kind of see it. There are times where I think they let the quarterback struggle a lot, and you ask yourself, should he be playing? I do think they might. It's possible the Titans could face that because their roster, if they go with Cam Ward number 1 and they don't trade for more picks, and even if they do, I don't know if they can surround Cam Ward with a good support system as well as they would like to.
Well, it's all about, what are their expectations? Is their expectations is to be better from a record standpoint, or is their expectation for this organization to be better just as a team? Because as you're getting better as a team, sometimes it may not, or the development of the team. Is that what you want to see? More importantly, it's the quarterback. Do you see the development of quarterback? Because you can have a quarterback that's developing, but the team is sort of on a different tier than he is. Meaning as a whole, the team is not as good, but you see the progress. So it may not end up ultimately in wins, but it ends up in, okay, I can see some of what I need to be seen in regards to development of the quarterback. I see that. So is your expectation for the record or the development of the quarterback? Because ultimately that's what it's about. They feel you can develop the quarterback, then they are going to retain you as head coach.
615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. It's time for a Cam Ward temperature check. How are you feeling about Cam Ward potentially, most likely, being the Titans quarterback in just a matter of days? We've been talking about it for months. NFL Draft Week is here. How are you feeling about Cam Ward and his impending marriage with the Titans as round 1 approaches in just a few days? 615-737-1025. It's time for the 4th annual 615 Open Charity Golf Tournament, benefiting Folds of Honor and presented by Gary Force Acura. Cromwell Media, along with partners Fox 17, Outfront Media, and Social Indoor, are proud to announce we will be back at Hermitage Golf Course on Thursday, May 29th to make a difference while having a great time. You can join us and a few guest media members, athletes, and musicians as we raise money for Folds of Honor. Donations will go to provide life-changing scholarships to families of America's fallen or disabled military and first responders. Sign up to play or sponsor at 615open.com.
All right, let's talk Lee Company, 615-567-1000 or leecompany.com. Got a little rain today, so the air conditioning probably not needed as much, although over the weekend, I got to say, the air conditioning was probably useful for you. So that might have been one of the first times you kicked it on during the spring months. If you're like me, you like to hold out as long as you can before you crank that thing every day. But it's not too late to get the air conditioning unit checked if you haven't, or if you kicked it on and you're like, not really cooling the way we want it to, haven't had this service in a while, Lee Company can help you in that department. And anything that's going on in your house, general maintenance, so of course your air conditioning, your heating, your plumbing, your electric. Got issues there? Call them, 615-567-1000 or leecompany.com. That's 615-567-1000 or leecompany.com. Lee Company, proud sponsor of Nashville Predators coverage here on 102.5 The Game, and they've been in business since 1944. It's leecompany.com.
I think what you're hitting on, Russell, an interesting word that you settled on the word settle, because that is the way I think everyone who it doesn't believe in Cam Ward's generational ability views he's being pushed up to the top of the draft board just because he's a quarterback and wouldn't ordinarily be at the top of the draft board if he was in a different draft, and so on and so forth, and that the Titans are settling for him. And all I would say is this: the front office and the coaching staff aren't just doing it just because they're tired and sick and tired of what they saw from Will Levis. They have to believe that Cam Ward is this good. They're not just doing it based on the fact that, well, we're not first overall too much more often, and we're at the top of the draft board, so we're just going to take the quarterback just because. They have to have grinded the tape and have talked to the kid in a way that we haven't. And all I would just say is in that you have to trust Russell, to be honest with you.
That was Rich Eisen answering a question from a listener named Russell about the Titans, quote unquote, settling for Cam
I was
Ward.
thinking for a second, who's Russell?
It was
Crowe?
Russell. It was Russell in New Jersey. Russell in New Jersey called the Rich Eisen show and wondered if Rich
I thought there was a new man in the front office named Russell. I was like, wait, they got Russell in there? I thought we were talking about
Hey,
Chad
but
Brinker,
we've received a lot of
Borgonzi?
similar calls.
Russell Borgonzi? Is
Yes.
his middle name Russell?
Who knows? But we've received a lot of similar calls from listeners Over
Some
the-
named Russell, some named other names.
Yes. Speaking of callers, Lance is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Lance, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Well, y'all was talking about a while ago with the Cowboys and stuff. I lived there back then, and you know, Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson came into a situation where Jerry owned the team, and he actually hadn't started taking his stupid pills yet, and let Jimmy Johnson run it, and he built a team. But that first year, yes, everybody in Dallas was mad. Number one is they were 1-15. Number two is Jerry Jones fired Tom Landry, and there was Tom Landry that's the reason there was a hole in Texas Stadium so God could watch his football team play, is what we said in Texas. And,
That was a big story. That was a big story.
and you just, if you really get down to it, they don't give these kids time enough to mature anymore. Y'all are correctly, and the owners listen to the fans too much. And as Derek says, you listen to them too much, you're gonna be sitting with them. And that's she started listening. They started firing GMs. They started firing head coaches and making stupid mistakes, and you end up picking first. And that's what's happened. And I don't think they should draft Cam Ward. I think that they should build a football team and then find their quarterback later. But I'm not getting the pick, and maybe they can't get enough for him to satisfy him. But I'll hang up and listen to your thoughts.
Thanks
Thank
for the
y'all.
call,
Have
Lance.
a great day.
You
Yeah.
as well.
Because here's in lies the problem, and I've said this before, and we've discussed this before. Do you trust? Because everything that was laid out by Eisman was right. Like, these are the things, like, they got to grind the tape.
Rich
They
Eisen
gotta
was
do,
on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they got to
he-
grind the tape. They got to do all of this. So they're doing all of these things to make sure that he is the right guy, not settling. Because as bad as we may think the Titans are, I don't believe that they settle for individuals, especially not right now when you're talking the first pick overall or first pick in the first round or second round. But if they believe, after doing all of that, they believe that Cam Ward is the guy, then okay. But I don't think fans believe enough in the team that they did the grinding of the tape. Or if they did, because of past history, it's not going to matter. We don't trust you with the number one pick.
To that point, Skylar on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com, says, I'm not arguing that Cam Ward isn't a great talent. I'm worried that the Titans franchise is going to fail the young man with a lack of talent around him, and then everybody will be fired in a year or two.
Well, that you can't help that if you're the Titans. You have to make the best decision that you think is best for the franchise.
Exactly.
You can't worry about the noise like that. That reputation preceded Borgonzi. He can't worry about that. Eisen's point that I thought was good as well is they could have chosen to table the quarterback question for another year and gone with somebody else on the frontier. As I talked about, we're going to have to close the book on the story of the frontier,
It's
the
over.
quarterback frontier,
Yeah.
because it's
For now.
it looks like they've made the decision.
Yeah.
But they went this way. That Eisen pointed that out. He said, you got to have faith that they have done the homework and decided that Ward is better. That's a better pathway to try to choose than table it for a year and try to find a bounce back category and address the roster just because of all the factors at play.
So this idea of settling if the Titans draft Cam Ward, one thing that we have pointed out, it's been pointed out on other shows on our station, it's been pointed out by our callers and our texters, where Cam Ward ranks on lists of the top prospects in the NFL draft. Jeff Legwold, who's a veteran ESPN reporter, unveiled his...
And an original Tennessee Oilers beat writer for the Tennessean.
He goes far back.
Goes way back. Yeah.
Jeff Legwold unveiled his list of the top 100 prospects in the NFL draft. He has Cam Ward at number 18 out of 100. Dane Brugler of The Athletic, the author of The Beast, the NFL Draft Guide. Dane Brugler, in his latest list of the top 300 prospects, Cam Ward locks in at number 13. So when we're talking about settling, I'm emphasizing that word, settling on Cam Ward. These lists compiled by many different draft analysts have Cam Ward in the low teens, the high teens, 8, 9, 10. And we keep coming back to that when we're talking about, and Willie, this is, I think, the point you were making at the top of the show, that generally speaking, Cam Ward is not thought of as a number 1 overall pick caliber prospect. So if and when the Titans take him on Thursday night, that is going to be a topic of conversation. Did the Titans settle on Cam Ward because they needed a quarterback?
Well, not only is it going to be the story on Thursday, it's going to be the story for years to come. And only time will tell as to whether that was a good decision or not.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's an interesting decision, is because he'll always be measured by he was the first pick in the draft, and the consensus was, because I don't think those are out of line. You can find 13, 18. You can find people as high as 6 or 8, but I don't think anybody that I've seen has him as the best pro prospect in this draft.
I feel like the highest I've seen recently, Mel Kiper, I think, had him at number 6.
Right.
I feel like that's the highest I've seen Cam Ward on these big boards, these top prospect lists.
But it doesn't matter where these big boards have him. It doesn't. He's a top prospect. That's all that matters. And what matters is where the Titans have him on their big board. If they have him as the number 1 player in their minds in the draft, then you draft him number 1 overall. That's the luxury sort of having the number 1
wouldn't
pick.
that be a good question to ask, which you probably wouldn't get the answer? But
No
honest
no
answer
GM, no
from
GM.
Mike Borgonzi. Did you have him number 1 on your board?
I don't
Because
think no GM is going
it's okay
to,
for him to say no. I don't think.
I don't know. You can't say
he's,
no.
But
You
he's a
can't.
quarterback.
You can't say no, because if you're going to draft,
You can't say no.
No, you would be. I think it'd be malpractice.
Really? So
Yeah.
if you looked at him and said,
Yes,
Derek, let's be honest here.
Mhm.
He was not the top guy on our board, but he plays a position that is so hard to find, and we think he's going to be a great quarterback for us. That's
can
not an
do-
acceptable answer.
No, you can do that.
You have to
in the
lie and say,
you-
yeah, he was number 1 on our board.
You can do that in the 2nd round, 3rd round, maybe the 3rd or 4th round. You could do that because it's like, okay, yeah, we didn't think, but we felt that was a need. We had a need in the 3rd round, so we just. But when you're talking about the number 1 pick in the draft, no.
Okay. See, this
you can't
is
say,
really the question.
well,
this
I
is
would
going to
agree
be the question.
I would
going
agree
forward.
with Derek
Yeah.
on this one.
He
I
would be
think
the
you
number
are-
5. If we were
Right.
ranking guys, you would be 18. But we felt no. People were
Yeah.
like, well, you shouldn't have drafted him.
Yes, I agree with Derek.
So
on this
you're
one.
just saying they shouldn't draft him then?
No, I'm not saying that.
You're saying if he's
no,
number 1 on their board.
I said
But
as
I
long
don't
as
think he is
Cam
number 1 on
Ward
the
is
board.
number 1 on their board, in their mind, he's number 1. He is the guy that's going to change our franchise. Then you do it. You draft him. If he's number 2, number 3, no, that's the luxury of having a number 1 pick. Because when you, and I guess that would be the downfall too, because if it's that close, what do? I don't know.
If the option is not to trade down.
Yeah.
Because I think we're all sitting there saying right now, if they got a phone call today
Mhm.
and somebody offered them a great package for the first pick, I still think they would be interested in hearing that out.
I think
I
you'd be
think
a
at this
fool
point,
not to be
yes.
not to hear that.
If it was a legit offer,
Yeah,
it's like, hey, we'll throw you an extra 3rd round pick. Then that ship has sailed
Yeah.
for sure. But we're assuming when we have this discussion that opportunity is not on the table right now.
Yeah, as long as the Titans, and listen, we may never know. We may know. I don't know. It may slip up and come out. I don't know. But as long as they have him as their number 1 prospect after they've evaluated their because listen, it's not just being the number 1 prospect coming out of college. It's evaluating your team, where your team is at, how you get your team to, how do we further develop our team? What does the landscape of the college guys that are coming out? Then you sort of set your board, I believe, because now I get a better sense of who I'm putting 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in regards to my big board, because I've already assessed my team, my needs, and my want. Yeah, if you know, um, if Miles Garrett, the way he's playing right now, if he was coming out this year, no doubt he would be a number one pick. But what if you assessed your team? You looked at our needs, our things that we don't need. You assess your team right before the draft, and then you base your board based upon your team, not necessarily everybody else.
615-737-1025. By the way, this is the latest, or excuse me, the closest to the start of the NFL draft that there have been no trades for first round picks in the common draft era, at least. That's according to ESPN. The Joe Montana trade in 1993 came 5 days before the draft. This year now has surpassed that. So I do find that to be interesting as well. 615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts. Would the Titans be settling if they take Cam Ward with the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft on Thursday? Let us know. 615-737-1025. Speaking of that phone number, be caller number 3 right now at 615-737-1025, and you will win a family 4-pack of tickets to see the Nashville Sounds take on the Durham Bulls at First Horizon Park this Thursday. Caller number 3, 615-737-1025. First pitch for that game, by the way, is at 6:35 p.m. We'll continue the conversation next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D. Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. This week's Nashville's best deal is Fog Street Lawn Club, Nashville's premier soccer pub and rooftop. Fog Street Lawn Club offers scrumptious bites, British lawn bowling, and premier soccer pub vibes. Get half off a $30 gift card now at thegamenashville.com/deals and dive into the ultimate rooftop experience. All right, so the question we were discussing before, would the Titans be settling, emphasis on the word settling, if they take Cam Ward #1 overall? Let's get to your reaction on the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Randy says, yes, they're settling, in my opinion. We won't know for sure until after they fire Callahan and he does a tell-all interview afterwards. Jeff says, guys, I don't care who you draft with the first pick looking for a franchise changer, but I know this. If the Titans field a pathetic offensive line again this season, you can put whoever you want behind center, and it will be another year of paper bags passed out at the gates to wear on our heads again. Dustin from Hopkinsville says they're settling at picking any quarterback #1. Other teams can develop these quarterbacks. We can't. Get a home run at quarterback. Well, who is a home run at quarterback? Is there going to be a home run at quarterback next year or the year after? We may be in the same situation. We, meaning people who, watch the NFL. Like, what if the quarterback class next year, we're having the same conversations? Well, Arch Manning, he wouldn't go #1 overall in a normal quarterback draft, but he's the best they've got, so he's going to go #1, or Drew Aller or whomever. Like, how often do home runs come about? Rarely. So, I mean, that's where I am on this situation. Like, is Cam Ward, quote unquote, a home run? I don't know. The people who know this stuff better than I do say, no, he's not. But there's also risk in waiting and hoping that the next crop of quarterbacks has a home run in it. Look back at recent quarterback drafts. Did people think that Bryce Young was going to be a home run? That hasn't worked out so far. Did people think that Anthony Richardson was going to be a home run? That hasn't worked out so far. So I think there's as much risk in passing on Cam Ward and hoping that you'll find that home run quarterback soon than taking him and again hoping that he is. I think, like, I don't love the idea of, we'll just wait and hope that somebody else comes around.
Again, it goes back to, if you feel that he's your guy, then you draft him. Again, when you're talking to Titans fans, they are anxious. Some are outraged. Some are to a point to where it's I wait and see with this team. But again, I go back to, I don't think they have the faith in this organization that, unless he's a surefire, like, can't miss guy, I don't know. If indeed it is Luck, out of Andrew Luck, excuse me, Andrew Luck.
Not to be confused with Drew Lock.
Drew Lock, yes. If Andrew Luck was coming out,
who was Drew Lock famously sat in the lounge in Nashville for the full first round and did not get picked.
Awkward.
Yeah,
very awkward.
That's always tough.
But if you have somebody like Andrew Luck, where it's surefire, and I don't even think your organization can mess you up, then I think you feel more comfortable. But because Cam Ward, in their eyes, they don't believe Cam Ward is that type of prospect, then it's okay, can I fall back on a coaching staff to develop him? Well, when you don't have an Andy Reid, when you don't have a Kyle Shanahan, when you don't have a McVay, when you don't have some of these other coordinator / head coaches that has somehow been able to, because of them or because of the quarterback's coach, they've been able to develop a quarterback within their system and been very prosperous by doing it. Well, I don't think the fans trust that the Titans, outside of, the pick being Andrew Luck, that the Titans can develop a quarterback. And if that's the case, I don't know if too many Andrew Lucks are on the horizon. We can look at Manning and say, well, but no one's sitting here and raving about him like they did Andrew Luck. So unless there's an Andrew Luck coming out, or a guy that develops into Andrew Luck, then you're going to be perpetually in the same thing over and over again.
I want to point out one thing in that Connor Orr article that I was referencing earlier at Sports Illustrated. He notes that in 2020, All 4 first-round quarterbacks, Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, and Jordan Love, made it to second contracts with their original teams. However, the following year, only one of the 5 first-rounders, Trevor Lawrence, made it to a second deal. Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, and Justin Fields were all on different rosters prior to the expiration of their rookie deals. The lone first-round quarterback selected in 2022, Kenny Pickett, is on his 3rd team already. While it's too early to offer a judgment on the 2023 class, 2 of the first 3 quarterbacks selected, Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson, found themselves benched at some point during the 2024 season. But Willie, I want you to answer this question from a texter because I think it's a good one. Here is my argument regarding the settling comment when it comes to Cam Ward. Would it be settling if the Browns or Giants take him at 2 or 3? Or if better yet, if someone traded up to number 1 to get him? Or would it be considered a smash, slam dunk, home run?
For the Titans, if they traded up,
I think it's generally speaking.
so I guess his point is, unless somebody takes him between 6 and 18, where he is, the consensus has him. If anybody takes him above that, it's settling, is his point.
Let me read it again. Here is my argument regarding the settling comment. This is an unnamed texter. When it comes to Cam Ward, would it be settling if the Browns or the Giants take him at 2 or 3?
Yeah, I think in general, I see his point. He's saying anybody, it's not just about the Titans. It's
Right.
anybody who would
Yes.
select a quarterback above where he is generally considered, where he falls
especially in this draft.
in this draft. And I think that is the consensus. And it's not the first time this has happened in NFL history. It's happened a lot. Quarterbacks always move up.
Quarterback, they get the
but we're
ball.
talking about the first pick,
Mhm.
or maybe even the second or the third pick, when he is generally not graded that high relative to everybody else on the board.
And it's interesting because he put up impressive numbers last season. He threw for more than 4,300 yards. He threw for 39 touchdowns. According to Jordan Reed of ESPN, his 88.7 total QBR ranked 2nd in the country, and his 29 completions of 20-plus air yards tied for 5th.
I think what happens is, and I don't know, it should be more of a plus than it is not. And I guess some guys, it's a plus and some guys it's not. That you've watched, from Incarnate Word to Washington State, then to Miami. You saw the development of this young man, and you saw him get better at each stage. So the ability to learn and to comprehend and to adapt and to always wanting to get better and develop. This is a part of his makeup. And it's not like he's had the same. So he had to go from Incarnate Word to Washington State, which had a different system. Then Washington State to Miami, which had a different system. So this young man is capable of learning systems as quickly as he needs to. And not only learn them, but he's able to go out and be, more than efficient. Let's not forget, he was in the race to win the Heisman. He was one of the top 4 or 5 players when it was all said and done. So that should be more of a plus than anything. And I think I'm not sure if that's being used in his favor enough.
What's one part of the Cam Ward origin story we've heard a lot? He was a 0-star recruit coming out of high school. 24/7 Sports actually wrote an article about this the other day, that Cam Ward, should the Titans take him, he will be the first number 1 overall pick who was a 0-star recruit out of high school in their database's history. Now,
How long did that database
since
go back?
2000.
But
So-
there's such thing as a late bloomer, though.
Right,
That
I'm
is
just
that
saying
is a
it's
very
part-
noteworthy
It's
stat.
part of the
But
story.
it doesn't. It's not a disqualifier for me.
No,
'cause
I'm not-
it does happen that
Right.
way.
I'm not saying that it is a
Yeah.
disqualifying aspect. I think it speaks to the strides that Cam Ward has made over
Yeah.
the course of his career to go from a high school prospect with 0 stars to the number 1 overall pick in the draft. That should count for something.
Why would I rather have a guy? And this is why I think in this draft in particular, why he is regarded higher than say his next 2 or 3 close competitors in a sense, is because his ceiling is a lot higher than they feel he still has room to grow. they look at Shador and his ceiling is probably not as high. They look at Jackson Dart or some of these other quarterbacks and the ceiling, they've just about reached their ceiling. Well, you look at Cam Ward, kind of like you looked at Richardson. I think Cam is further along than Anthony Richardson was and is even now. But I think the looking at these guys and the potential is so great. Like there's no there's no there's no limit to how good this guy can be. So, if you're looking at it from that standpoint, then this is why you draft a guy like Cam Ward.
I think the theme that they will hit on when he goes up to that podium as the first pick will be exactly what you said. It won't be about the Titans as much as here's a guy that was a non-recruited
Mhm.
player out of high school, and now here he is as the first pick. That's the human interest story I think they will center on, and we should not overlook that story, even though
No.
I'm sure from the Titans standpoint, yeah, that's great,
Mhm.
but can he play for us? Is he going to win for us?
615-737-1025. We will continue to take your Cam Ward temperature check. How are you feeling about it now that the draft is here? It's this week. And by the way, let me tell you, not to miss Nashville's best NFL draft coverage on the Game Nashville Sports Network. We will be broadcasting live from Twin Peaks in Madison on Thursday and Friday from Boomba's Pizza and Watch Bar in East Nashville. Coverage begins at 6 o'clock each day, presented by Hardee's, Parman Tractor and Equipment, Twin Peaks, Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, Shane Cohen Professional Home Improvements. But coming up next, the Predators, players, and Andrew Burnett addressed reporters for the final time this season on Friday. Some really interesting comments, including something that I noticed about Andrew Burnett that's making me wonder if he is less safe than I thought he was. And we'll discuss that coming up next. 615-737-1025. Willie Darnick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D-Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service, and we are proudly presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. The Stanley Cup playoffs started, I should say, over the weekend. Some good games. Of course, the Nashville Predators were not participating. They missed the postseason for the second time in 3 years. And on Friday, Predators players and coach Andrew Brunette held their final news conferences of the season. And there were some interesting comments that came out of those news conferences, which we will play for you now. So the first one I want to play is Andrew Brunette answering the question a lot of Predators fans have. What's his status moving forward? Will Andrew Brunette be the coach of the Nashville Predators next season? Here is how Andrew Brunette answered that question.
Yeah, I'm here to coach. Love my job, love my team until I'm told otherwise. I'm going to continue to work and become a better coach. And I think I'm an extremely competitive person. Sometimes it doesn't always come out that way, but and I think our group is an extremely competitive group. And we're not where we want to be. It was not from a lack of care or work. It just didn't happen. And myself and my staff, we're going to go back to work. And I think we're going to take a breath. We're going to analyze, find out what we can do better, where we can do better, what went wrong. Don't have all the answers right now. I think for me, just clear my head a little bit, but I'm looking forward to finding solutions. Like I said, I played a long time and my path wasn't the easiest path. And what I loved about the game probably the most was finding ways. And this is a great challenge and I can't wait to start. And if I'm told otherwise, I feel very confident in my ability to continue that path.
So that was Andrew Brunette. And two things struck me about that, one of which you can't see. The first is that final line. If I'm told otherwise, I feel very confident in my ability to continue that path somewhere else, basically. A coach who is feeling certain about his job status probably doesn't throw that caveat in there.
Well, he did say, just to give you the context of that answer, right before he gave that answer, he said he had spoke with all the players, but he had not had the meeting with Barry Trotz yet to determine what's going forward, which is why he couldn't really say, I'm back or I'm not back, right? He can't say for sure. He does have 2 remaining years on his contract.
The other thing that struck me about that comment, which again, you couldn't see, is that Brunette did it alone. He held that same news conference at the end of last season, sitting next to Barry Trotz. I was watching Rick Tocchet in Vancouver. He held his end of season news conference. There are questions about Rick Tocchet's future in Vancouver. He did his news conference by himself. So I actually went back and looked to make sure. And last year at the end of the season, when the Predators were eliminated by Tocchet's Canucks in the first round of the playoffs, Brunette and Trotz did their news conference side by side. So that did strike me. Maybe I'm making a little bit more out of it than I should, but it did stand out to me that Brunette held his news conference alone. But the comment that swept social media was made by Jonathan Marchessault. And we talked about Jonathan Marchessault last week. Robbie Stanley talked about in talking with people in the organization. A lot of people are rubbed the wrong way by Jonathan Marchessault. We've talked about how he can come off as quote unquote surly sometimes. But Robbie Stanley did ask Jonathan Marchessault about Andrew Brunette's offensive approach and if adjustments need to be made. And here was Marchessault's response.
Yeah, clearly it didn't work. Right. So obviously there's going to be some adjustment to do. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a guy that has a lot of opinions, so I don't think I'm going to run them out right now. But, yeah, there's definitely adjustment. I think one of the things that we adjusted this year that I think was good is in our D zone, sometimes we had our winger a lot on the boards, and now they were more towards the middle. So we kept a lot of things towards the outside, and I think our D zone got better with that. That's one of the things that we did better this year, I think, from the beginning to the middle. So, yeah, I mean, obviously there's adjustment that needs to be done. And to be honest, my mindset is every team in the NHL should take a page of the books of the best teams in the NHL. I think they're the reason why they're there. Yes, they have sometimes they go up. They're at the cap. I think that's something that's super important to be competitive. But yeah, I think some of the teams that are the best, they do something really good to be there, and I think everybody needs to take a little bit of page of the good teams in the league. That's why that's why playoff hockey is the best hockey, because that's why you look at the teams, you like see how they play their game, their system, how they adjust certain situation, like, because I've had a lot of different coaches, and probably one of the best coaches I ever had was Bruce. And one thing, like me and him, we definitely headbutt each other, but he adjusts every game, and he's an unbelievable hockey mind, and there's a reason why they're so good. Obviously they have the tools over there, but he's a guy that thinks the game super well, and that's something that I really enjoyed from him.
Okay, a couple of things. First, I want to clarify. He was talking about Brunette's overall approach, not specifically his offensive approach. So I want to clarify that. The second thing is, as I was listening to that the other day, I first saw the transcript that Robbie tweeted out, but then I listened to it as soon as I could get a hold of the audio. It was almost like when you're in a new relationship and your new partner is remembering fondly some of the things that their ex used to do. It's like you do a thing a certain way. You're like, oh, Johnny used to do this. Like, why are you talking about John? Why are you talking about Johnny? I'm not Johnny. Like, at the end, he's talking about Bruce Cassidy, who was the coach of the Vegas Golden Knights. So that part where he was talking about Bruce Cassidy,
yeah.
I'm just like, he's fondly remembering his ex while he's in a relationship with somebody else. But there are two questions I want to ask. I want to ask one to Willie and one to Derek. So Willie, hearing that response from Marchessault, and again, for more context, that was the most newsworthy soundbite. Marchessault spoke for much longer than that. So there are other things that he said that we will provide that context in that nuance. But Willie, hearing what Marchessault said, and was there anything he said that was not well-reasoned, anything that he said that was out of bounds? And based on what you know of Brunette and the adjustments he made, do you feel like he made the proper adjustments over the course of the season?
I think I look at Marchessault as a guy who he will say what is on his mind.
And he mentioned that in the clip. He doesn't bite his tongue.
Doesn't bite his tongue, and has played on winning teams. And he played for a number of different coaches in Vegas, right? They fired the coach after they missed the playoffs a couple years ago. They hired Bruce Cassidy, Bruce, as he calls him, just the first name only. And then they won the whole thing. And he said, I butted heads with Bruce. So I think Marchessault is telling you he's not afraid to voice his opinion to his coach. And that's what you get when you get Marchessault. You get the good, and you get you get all of him.
You get
right?
the good, you get the bad.
And I will say this about his whole interview.
Wasn't that
right?
the thing about the facts of life?
Yeah.
You get the good, How did that guy? I don't
Take
remember.
the good to take the bad to get them all, and then you have the facts of life.
There you go.
There,
Phoenix.
thank you.
Yes, one of my favorite shows.
Thank you.
By the way,
Nevertheless.
One of my favorite shows. We'll have a show about the facts of life someday. Not the actual facts of life, but the show, the facts of life. Joe and Blair, big fans. If you listen to his whole interview, it is very positive. It is very accountable.
Mhm.
He says a number of times, I didn't play well. I woke up the next day and I said to myself, what do I do to have the right mindset to be better today? So the quote that had everybody buzzing on Friday is really not I think the overhaul of the overview of the whole interview, but that's the quote that's going to have everybody saying, what's he talking about there? And I do think they got off to a terrible start. And I think when you get off to a terrible start, you question everything. It's like Steven Stamkos, I thought said it very well also. When you're not doing well, you're like, well, maybe we should play something different. And you've got the coach going, guys, if you just buy in, it will work. I need you to buy in.
Mhm.
But I think you had people like Marchessault saying, I think we should do it different. And then at a certain point, Andrew Brunette said, all right, let's make some adjustments. Let's do it different. I think Andrew Brunette really believes that his system, which is different,
Mhm.
it's unique. That's what makes it good. And he was getting articles written about him all across hockey. Like, wow, look at this guy. He watches basketball. He watches soccer. He watches other sports. And he comes up with these creative ways to play that others don't do. And he's Coach of the Year nominee because of it. He doesn't do what Marchessault says necessarily and says, hey, just copy what all the other teams do. The good teams do and do it the same way. But it's a great philosophical debate. I don't think either one is right or wrong.
Well, listen, from just a guy that, was once a player, and have done a bunch of these interviews. First and foremost, the one thing you never do is bring up your former team in that type of light.
Your
Like,
ex.
yeah, you're bringing them up, and it's
Right.
fond. You're fondly thinking
I'm
about.
sure
it.
it didn't go over very well.
Bruce used to do it this
Yeah,
way.
Right.
well,
I'm sure
Bruce
it doesn't
used
go
to-
over
yeah.
very well with the coach.
Bruce used to do it,
Even though he
this
said
way.
several other things
Yeah.
good about the current coaching staff, that one thing will definitely.
But that's
like,
not
no.
what they. But that's not what. Because if you give someone like Marchessault enough time, eventually, because he tells it how he perceived it to be. That's what it's. Eventually, if you let him talk long enough, he's going to say something that may be sort of controversial in a sense. What I'm hearing from a guy is, listen, I don't know if everyone else feels like this, because your true self come out in interviews as you started doing more and more, especially if you do one that is lengthy, like one that is lengthy. Eventually, it'll come out how you feel. If there are other guys that think like him behind closed doors, Coach Bruno ain't gonna be there.
And we will
He's
play Steven Stamkos's response to the same question here in a little bit. But the question I have for you, Derek, and you've already started touching on it, is one of the central questions that the Predators, Barry Trotz specifically, are going to have to answer is, does Andrew Brunette have the respect of the veteran players? And when you hear a veteran player who is in year one of a 5-year contract, who's won the Stanley Cup, who's been a playoff MVP, who speaks his mind, which I respect, I am not going to criticize Jonathan Marchessault for speaking his mind, because as I said last week, and our friend Elliot Freeman mentions this on his podcast all the time, we can't criticize hockey players for being boring, and then when they say something interesting, say, he can't say that. You can't have
How
it
could he
both-
do that?
You can't have it both ways. So I am not criticizing Jonathan Marchessault for speaking his mind. I respect that. But to your point, Derek, and that's my question, when you hear a veteran leader say that in public, Robbie Stanley made this point this morning, that if that's what Marchessault was saying to Robbie Stanley and Alex Daugherty and Brooks Bratton and people who report on the team every day, imagine what he might be saying behind closed doors. So does hearing that give you any pause that Brunette may not have the total and complete respect of this dressing room?
Respect, belief. There's a thin line between both of them. There is. Because I think there can be, I respect that coach, but I just don't believe in his system. You can have that. So do they have respect for him? I think they do respect him. They respect him as a coach. They respect him. Guys like Marchessault, Stamkos, Shea, Forsberg, those guys, they respect him. But again, it's not about respect. It's about belief. Now, do I believe? You got my respect now, but do I believe that you can get the job done? Well, when you start bringing up your past stops or your past head coaches, that belief is sort of diminished some from those who are listening. It's like, man, I understand. Do you truly believe, because you're saying some of these things, do you truly believe that his system, you believe in somebody else's system more than you believe in his system? So again, if there are more guys that are in this camp, and I get it that he said a lot of, took accountability and you put the blame on him not playing well and everything else, and it's more of a team than I. And that's what you want your leaders to be about. How do we get better as a team? But if he's going in there, and if anyone else thinks that way, like, hey man, I just don't think this system is the right system for us, and I just don't. You got to move on from him.
It's
You
a
can't
tough.
sit and
It's
hope. You
very
can't
tough.
sit in it and say, "Well, it'll get better," because the last time this came up was in the middle of the season, and I do remember Coach Bruno saying, "Man, I don't know I don't have many changes I can make," So, and maybe like he said, listen, when you go back and you're able to decompress and you're able to look at it from a different vantage, then maybe now I can start seeing some of the things I didn't see during the season. So now there may be changes that I can make, but when I was in it, I couldn't see all of the changes that should have been made.
Brunette talked about the fog clearing.
Yeah.
Taking
and he
a
mentioned
step
it
back.
a
Exactly.
number of times
Yes.
in his post game. He didn't use the fog analogy
Mhm.
in the press conference like he did on our television broadcast, but he said a number of times, I got to get away from it from a little bit. But I do think we need to discuss, because I do think that's the central thing for this team, if he's back,
Mhm.
is how do you play with this group? Do we start over and have a different system, or do you go with the theory of, now that Marchessault, Shea, and Stamkos have been here for a year, they're not coming in fresh like they were before, that they will be way better from the start of next year than they were at the start of last year? Because here's another context, I think, part. If you're in real time and you're Andrew Brunette, number one, you were a Jack Adams nominee the year before.
2 of the past 3 seasons.
2 of the past 3 seasons, but
Runner-up.
more importantly, in Nashville last season.
Yes.
You have a system that worked better than anybody's wildest dreams, right? And you're incorporating these 3 guys who are coming in. Well, that's 3 out of 20 some odd players. Here is what else was happening. They're going 0-5. Andrew Brunette, should you scrap the system after 5 games?
No.
When you're 0-5 to 5 games out of 82? That was the worst case scenario. But because what else was happening? Gus Nyquist was struggling. Roman Josi was struggling. Luke Evangelista was struggling. Tommy Novak was struggling. The guys that flourished in that system last year, the theory was those guys will pick up the slack for the new guys as the new guys get adjusted. But everybody struggled. So that put them behind the 8 ball so fast in the blink of an eye. And so I don't blame Andrew Brunette after 5, even 10 games saying, we'll get it. Guys, just hang in there. Give me the buy-in. We'll be all right. And I think very early, after 10, 15 games, when it wasn't getting a lot better, I think you started having people pulling, well, maybe we do. Maybe this group is different. Maybe we do need to. And I think even Andrew Brunette was having to come to grips with that. So I think that was the struggle. And then they did adjust. Andrew Brunette did make some adjustments. But by then, they were so far behind, it was too late for it to really make a difference.
And I'm reminded of something before we go to break. I'm reminded of something that Derek said earlier in the season when talking about adjustments. And Derek, you likened it to an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator being asked by his team to change his scheme. And you said that if you were that OC or DC, you would say, if I change it too much, I'm losing my identity. You hired me because of this scheme. And if you want me to change my scheme so much that it is unrecognizable from what I'm known for, why even have me around, right? I believe that's what you said. So that's the question that I think the Predators and Brunette are going to have to ask themselves. 615-737-1025. After hearing those comments from Andrew Brunette and Jonathan Marchessault, where do you stand on things with the Nashville Predators? Let us know. 615-737-1025. We will play Steven Stamkos' response to that same question that Robbie asked Jonathan Marchessault coming up next. Again, get in on the conversation. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063 The Game.
Happy Monday, everyone. This is Derek Mason, and you heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD for some time. If you set out to lose some weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a resolution to shed some extra pounds only to face disappointment. But I got some good news for you, because at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands this frustration of this cycle, and this is why they offer you a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you and you only. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
D. Mace, Finken, and Donick, 1025, 1063, the game, talking Predators. And before we get to Steven Stamkos' comments on Andrew Brunette, let's go to Bob in Antioch on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHunting.com. Bob, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, guys. I'm curious to learn your reaction to Marcia Show making his displeasure with Brunette public through the media. Do you think that that needed to be done that way, or do you think it will cause more problems moving forward?
Thank you for the call, Bob. And let me add on to that a text that we have on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHunting.com, and we can talk about this a little bit more. One texter says, not taking either side, but Jared mentioned that Marchessault and the Preds butt heads because he speaks his mind, and the Preds as a whole are a little slower developing, meaning on a traditional level. What are your thoughts on this? And do the Preds need to start making quicker decisions rather than kicking the tires before making a decision? So to clarify, the one thing that we know about the Vegas Golden Knights in their short history, the word I use to describe them is ruthless. They will make unpopular decisions involving popular players if they feel it's for the betterment of the franchise. Marchessault is an example. The one I think of most is Marc-Andre Fleury. Marc-Andre Fleury was the face of the Vegas Golden Knights, drafted in the expansion draft. And I want to say it was the owner, Bill Foley, at one point said, like, as long as I've owned this team, I'm never getting rid of Marc-Andre Fleury. And then he was gone, right? Something,
was gone.
something like that.
They kicked him to the curb,
Right.
very fast.
So they are, they are ruthless. I mean, they spend all, I don't know, they barely have any of their first round picks, either the ones that they were supposed to have or the players they drafted, because they're quick to move off of these guys to win now. So I think the texter's point is that the Golden Knights have shown in their short history that they are a ruthless organization, to use that word again. The Predators, they are loyal to a fault. If you are putting the loyalty scale in the NHL up on the board, the Predators and Golden Knights are on complete opposite ends. So I think that's what the texter is pointing. Should the Predators take a page out of the Golden Knights playbook when it comes to putting their team together?
It depends on what your value system is. I like the way the Predators do it, honestly. I mean, loyal to a fault is a good question, because that, when you say to a fault, that means there's faults. I think Mike Vrabel was loyal to a fault,
Yeah.
right? There was a lot of discussion along those lines throughout his tenure with the Titans. It's a good question. Marchessault, it'd be one thing if he had 35 goals and he's saying these things and everybody's looking around going, hey, man, they need to listen to Marchessault. And I think to be fair to Marchessault, he did sprinkle in throughout his media availability, I didn't get it done. And I appreciate that, because he had a bad year by his standards, by everybody's standards. He knows it.
Scored exactly half the goals he scored the year before. He had 42 goals in his final season with Vegas, 21 this season.
And I think if you thought he was going to score 40, that was probably
but
not
I expected more
realistic.
than 21.
And it was the way he struggled. And he chronicled it. He says, I don't think I've ever gone through a struggle. At least it's been a long time since he was a young player. Because remember, he was an undrafted guy that was sort of a late bloomer.
And he's never been on a team this bad.
Well, he was on a team that missed the playoffs a couple years ago, and he referenced that. But definitely not
they
one
barely
30th in the league.
They barely missed the playoffs.
Right. So he
They
was
lost
the
on a
first to
shootout,
point
I
out,
think.
without being prompted. Nobody had to ask him, hey, how do you feel about your – he said, look, I didn't play well. I've never gone through a struggle where I've gone 2 or 3 weeks without having any success, and that puts you in a tough mental state. But I will – when he says this about the coach and he references his former coach, I think the coaching staff is probably going, hey, we could do the same thing about you. We could talk the same language and call you out. I don't think you would really appreciate that. They could have done it subtly, but they chose not to do that. But I think there was just as much frustration from the coaching staff with Marchessault and for other players as well. But the whole thing going public, they could have gone public on Marchessault a few times, but they went the opposite, right? When they went to Vegas, and he's clearly had this year that was below par, and it's game 80, could they, if they wanted to, said, yeah, I wish he'd be the same player here as he was for them before that, but they didn't do that.
I'm
They
also
said, no,
wondering,
they to a person said, hey, we hope he has a great experience tonight. We want to play well for him, because they know they're playing the long game. They've got to have Marchessault bought in and playing well for this team going forward.
I'm also wondering, before we get to Derek's point, I'm also wondering about all of this Vegas talk we've heard from Marchessault recently. Now, as you mentioned, Willie, it took until the end of the season for the Predators to visit Las Vegas so that Marchessault could get his warm welcome from the Golden Knights fans. But he was clearly emotional about it, spoke lovingly of his experience in Las Vegas. Some might say he was a little bit over the top with how much he spoke about his love
Talking
for
about
Las
the
Vegas.
X again.
Right, talking about the X. And then he mentions Bruce in the clip. It's just like, I'm hearing a lot about Vegas lately. I'm not sure how that plays either.
Well, it reminds me of Mike Vrabel when he went up to New England and he spoke glowingly.
It's not like this everywhere
Not
else.
like this everywhere else. And all of a sudden now it became this big scandal. And, it ended up being a year later or 2 years later, he ends up in New England, after sitting out a year. And this sort of falls sort of in the same line where, a player is saying something about, where he used to be, and it sometimes it may not sit well. But here's what the problem is, or it's not even really a problem, but here's what the understanding has to be. I think Marshall Salt has to understand where he's at now, and not think about where he used to be, meaning how the organization run, not necessarily coaches. And I say that, because you could be a lot more outgoing, or you could be a lot more outspoken, and you could say some of the things over in Vegas that you can say, and people wouldn't bat an eye, and the coach will go at it with you or whatnot, and everything will be fine. But you come here and you come to Nashville, and this is not how they operate. They don't go out of their way to criticize, players, nor do they go out of their way to criticize coaches. Now, listen, Coach Bruno has gotten on his players, before. He, not by name, but we know who he was talking about when he said those things, or a particular group he was talking about. But he did it in a way where, hey, listen, it's more about the team. They know they got to play better, but it's more about the team. It's not reminiscent on what they used to have. And Marshall Salt went to what he used to have. Well, Marshall, you got to understand, you're not in Vegas anymore. It's like, you're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy.
Yeah.
You're not in Vegas anymore. So what you love, because I ran into this a lot playing. It's like, the thing that you love about that person is the thing that you ultimately will turn around and hate. You love the speak his mind and being vocal and not sugarcoating, but then you hate it too,
Right.
because
your greatest strength is your greatest
exactly,
weakness.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think this is the surly thing
Yeah.
with Marshall Salt. Yeah, you love it because he's up front, you know where he stands, but you hate it too, in a sense.
Right. Well, a couple examples that Andrew Burnett said without saying names,
Mhm.
but I think you could probably put Marshall Salt among the people in the category, because people were saying, well, what are some general examples of the commitment? Andrew Burnett referenced lots of, we didn't have the full commitment at times. He used blocking shots.
Mhm.
He used cheating for offense when things aren't going well. And he understands these things as a player, right? Andrew Burnett is like, look, I played over 1,000 games in the league. I know about these things.
Mhm.
I played with players like this. I was one of these players. What players do sometimes when you're lacking confidence, or you're lacking maybe the buy-in, you don't have the commitment. And I think that, he could have turned that and said, if it was all about one player,
Mhm.
he could have said that about one player, but he doesn't want to do that, because
Exactly.
that's smart not to do that, right?
Yeah.
He's going to, because the coach knows he's the guy that's going to take the fall. It's a lot easier to get rid of the coach than it is to make over the roster and get rid of all the players that are struggling in these categories.
And then there was that comment near the end of the season after a game, I believe it was, where Burnett called out the professionalism of the veteran players.
And it didn't happen very often, but there was the one game. I can't remember what game it was. They just got lit up. They got blown out.
Was it the Ducks game at home?
Maybe.
Nevertheless.
By and large, the team played hard, I think, under the circumstances down the stretch. They didn't quit. They played competitively, but there were a few games where they got blasted. And there was the one game, you're right. He did say, you kind of wish you had more. I think he wanted to say it.
Mhm.
I can't have my veterans mail it in here, even though we're out of it.
Speaking of some of those other veterans, let's hear what Steven Stamkos said when asked by Robbie Stanley the same question that he asked Jonathan Marchessault.
Yeah, it's tough. When you lose and when you're not having success, everything sucks, right? You find things to complain about. You find things to be negative about. It's any aspect of life, right? Things are going well, the food might have not been great last night, but I had a great time at dinner because today was a great day. When things aren't going well, everything sucks. You find ways to complain about things. That's human nature, and that's what crept into a lot of us this year, was those negative thoughts. So when you're talking about systems, was it new for a lot of us? Absolutely. Is there things that can be tweaked, I think, to help out the group that we have now? That's the challenge. Is every year there's different players on teams that you have to try to figure out what works. You have to see what works, what doesn't work, and then kind of evolve around that. So that takes some time, that takes some thought. So I think, is there one thing that's glaring that needs to be changed? I'm not sure if there is, but there certainly can be tweaks, and that's why you have those relationships with the leadership group and the coaches, and you try to feel out that process. And but sometimes you need to see it before, whether it works, whether it doesn't work. And this year obviously was a tough year, so I'm sure things will be talked about behind the scenes.
Quickly, that was a much more captainly response
Yes.
than Jonathan
And a great
Marchessault.
answer. Very
Yes.
insightful.
Far more diplomatic.
That was the answer that the Predators are used to. That's the Nashville Predator, where we're taking accountability, but it's all about us. We got to understand this was this team was new, and we just got to find a way to work. Guys got to find a way to adjust to what's going on. Coaches got to find a way to adjust to the players. But, we all understand that it needs to get better moving forward. And, that's the answer. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say something was like really wrong with Marchessault's answer, other than, comparing.
It's just more blunt.
bringing in the former coach Bruce. It was more blunt and to the point. But again, I was always taught it's not what you say to people, it's how you say it to them. You can say the same thing. Marchessault could have said that same thing, but smoothed it over a little bit, and maybe it would have came out a little bit different, or it just came, because what you're looking from Marchessault is that bluntness and that honesty, and sometimes it comes off as harsh. Where if you massage it just a tad bit, you can say the same thing, but it doesn't come off as harsh. Stamkos, he basically was saying some of the same thing, but he smoothed it all out for you.
Well, he's been a team captain
Right.
for a very long time. He has that experience of being that spokesperson.
And I would go the next step, D. Mace, and say, you can say whatever you want.
Yeah.
I think some coaches, too, they see different players.
Mhm.
Some are more blunt. Some are more diplomatic.
Mhm.
But the real issue is when they're in that locker room and it's game plan time and it's time to go out there, is everybody tight?
Mhm.
Is the chain link, all the links in the chain, are they set? That's really the question. It's not really what they say, because I do think it comes down to the central question of how do they want to play going forward, and will Andrew Brunette be the right guy to make the, as Steven Stamkos uses the term, tweaks to give them the best chance of winning next year.
615-737-1025. We will take your reaction to everything we've heard from the Predators so far. Well, they're done for the season. We'll hear from Barry Trotz at some point this week. I do not believe that news conference has been confirmed in terms of the time or date, but we will let you know as soon as we do at 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063 The Game. D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you talking Predators. Let's get to some of your reaction on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHonda.com. One texter says, I don't think I can be mad at Marchessault's answer because he's coming from a team that won a Stanley Cup compared to one that's just been a playoff contender most years, and in this case, has missed the playoffs 2 of the past 3 years. One texter says, the difference in Marchessault and Stamkos' answers was one guy was trying to be nice. Mark in Ashland City says, like it or not, they haven't won very much, and this year was a complete failure. With the moves they made and limited stuff they can do from a roster standpoint, it's got to fall on the coach. Fair or not, but this year was a complete failure, and if they don't make some changes to this coaching staff, I feel like it's them being way too loyal to a fault. That's Mark and Ashland City. One texter says, need to move on from Bruno because I don't want him struggling to make changes in the playoffs again. Marchessault made his comments in a way to get his message out without actually saying the message. Either Bruno will be gone or Marchessault will be gone with that statement. That's Jesse on our text line.
I mean,
I don't think Marchessault will be gone.
No.
I think that's reality. You would have to. I think you could probably trade him, but
Yeah.
he's got like I think 15 teams he can write down
He
and
has
say
a
you can't
15
trade me to
team
this.
no trade list.
So I think the practicality of doing that and what you would get back is probably a losing proposition.
yeah.
Well, I think he mentioned, so Riley Smith was an original member of the Golden Knights, just like Jonathan Marchessault. And Riley Smith, he was let go by the Golden Knights. I think he went to Pittsburgh and then to the Rangers, and then he was traded back to the Golden Knights at the trade deadline. And he was talking, about how great it was for Riley Smith to go back to Vegas. And feels like Jonathan Marchessault certainly wouldn't mind a return trip to Vegas either. But yeah, I have a hard time imagining that he's going to get moved.
Yeah, it's hard to it's easier in a sense to move the coach than it is the players, because of the contracts and the guarantees. And then for Marchessault, he basically is like half the teams you can't even offer to trade to because it's on his list. So if you're taking away half the teams in the league or just about, then the other half is going to lowball you anyway if you try to trade them. So again, you try to find a way to make this work. Because everyone may not feel like Marchessault, because it doesn't seem like Stamkos, judging by his answer, he feels the same way that Marchessault possibly feel, judging by the one answer he gave for a question when he was doing an interview for 15 minutes, close to it. So everyone in the room may both respect and have belief in the system, because this is what I do know with playing this game for a long time, just been in professional sports, that players, the good players, it takes more than just something not working for the first time. It's usually like something repeated over and over, and then we try to change it over, and it never. Then you hear those players. Then those players typically come like the really good ones. Like, because I was always under the assumption, like, listen, just put me in any system, I can find my way through it, but just put me in a position to where I can succeed, and I take it from there. Don't put me in a position that is not advantageous for us all. Just put us in good positions, and then we will take care of the rest. An offensive coordinator is only good because his players is making his system look good. That's really how it is, because if your system be good, but your players are not, the players are not elevating the system. So this is what has to be understood and figured out. Is it a system that works well, but the players are not elevating it? Or is it just, these players have done as much as they could and this system's just not working?
It's a really good question. I believe that any system, if everybody's bought in and you have enough good players, can be effective.
It may not be beneficial wholly for you individually, but it's successful. Like, the 97, 98, 99, that 2000 is really, that wasn't a system that was friendly to wide receivers,
Yeah.
but it worked.
Right.
We won playoff games. We got to the Super Bowl with that system.
Yeah, that's a great example. One thing that you hit on that I think about when you're as a player, you're sitting there looking at each other and you're losing and go, that has happened to us time and time again. Why is the same thing happening over and over? And I think Andrew Burnett pointed that out as well. And I think when you really get down to it, we're talking a lot about the forwards and the lack of scoring, but I think at the root of all of it is I don't think they defended very well.
They took a more significant drop in their defensive play than they did in their offensive play. Now, we focus, as you said, Willie, we focus on the offensive play because they brought in 2 40-goal scorers, and Burnett has coached some high-scoring teams, so that's where a lot of the focus is. But to your point, like if you look under the hood, their defensive process fell off much more significantly than their offensive process.
So I think if we're getting specific, I think that is really where they have to start over. If you look at Roman Josi from last year to this year, injuries had a big part of it, but he just had a big drop-off. He had a bad year. Then you had Brady Shea coming in for Ryan McDonough. That was a big minus for whatever the reasons, right? And it's not all on Brady Shea. Brady Shea is in this category of with Marchessault and Stamkos in that he had played for the same coach, for the same system for a long time, and it was a tough adjustment. And it got off to a terrible start. I think there's much more comfort now as he sits there after 1 year. Going into next year, I think he'll be in a better position to be an effective player. But that was a rough year for Brady Shea. It was a really rough year for Roman Josi. Alex Carrier and Jeremy Lauzon, huge year last year. Best buddies, great second defensive pair, career years, great second pair. Those guys were gone halfway through the year after getting off to a really poor start. And then, of course, the third pair is the third pair, right? You usually aren't going to sink or swim with the third pair, but they lost Dante Fabro. They had a lot of issues there too. But a lot of it fell on UC Saros. People are like, what's wrong with UC Saros? Kevin Woodley spelled that part of it out really well. For a while, UC Saros was covering for the really poor defensive environment that they were in every night. And then the roof caved in on that. He couldn't sustain it anymore. And you really felt that. So I think it's all connected, right? If they could square up defending better in their own end, they'll get better goaltending. And I think that leads to more offense. That's my theory. So I think we're sort of underreporting the root of the issue, which is how best to defend. Because Andrew Burnett's system, I think, leads to offense. It's all about offense. He says it. We want the puck. If we don't have it, let's get it back. Let's play going forward. The best offense is not having to be in our own zone. But it was all messed up because when the puck was in their own zone, they were giving up way too much, as Andrew Burnett calls it, free offense.
And we'll see what happens when Barry Trotz addresses reporters. I believe that is scheduled for Wednesday. It hasn't been made official, but the expectation is that on Wednesday, Barry Trotz will address reporters. We've already seen a few coaching changes made in the NHL. Peter Laviolette lost his job with the New York Rangers after 2 seasons. By the way, they are the 4th team. The Rangers are the 4th team to miss the playoffs the season after winning the President's Trophy. The Rangers were the best team in the league last season. A lot of drama in New York this season. They missed the playoffs entirely. Peter Laviolette lost his job as a result. The Anaheim Ducks made a coaching change, and more to come. There are going to be more coaching changes made, and we'll see if Andrew Burnett joins that list. 615-737-1025. If you have any stray thoughts on the Predators, we'll get back to that in just a little bit. But coming up next, Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, will join us. We'll get back into the NFL draft. Round 1, 3 days away. I bet TD has a lot of interesting stuff to tell us, and we will mine him for that information. Coming up next, 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Dean Base, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. And we are proudly presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, joined on our our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHonda.com, by Teron Davenport, ESPN, NFL Nation, Titans reporter, and co-host of Chasing Big Joe today in place of Big Joe Dubin. Excellent job as always, Teron. I wanted to ask you about something that Adam Schefter tweeted about yesterday that I find fascinating. He said that this is the closest to the start of the NFL draft that there have been no trades for first-round picks in the common draft era. He mentions that the Joe Montana trade in 1993 came 5 days before the draft. This year now has surpassed that. Any theories as to why there have been no first-round picks traded ahead of this draft?
Well, first of all, I might add host of Talking with TD, the podcast,
Of course,
as well to the list.
You are a multi-hyphenate, my friend. You do everything.
But I think it's interesting that no team has traded into the first round or anything like that, and I think it's just a testament to what a lot of people have been saying, and that the value in this draft is really in the second and third round and fourth round, and that's something that a lot of people talk about, that there's so many starters that could be found even on day 2, day 3. And that's what probably is making teams less likely to trade into the top part of it, because this draft doesn't have an abundance of blue chip players that, would warrant the big time trade up. And then again, you got a team at the top that is rejecting trades apparently, and that's the Titans.
So there isn't expected to be much drama with the number 1 overall pick. We're expecting it to be Cam Ward. I remember talking to you right after you left the NFL Combine. Your biggest takeaway was that if the Titans stick at number 1, they're taking Cam Ward. So let's talk about number 35. If you had to guess right now, your gut, which position, if the Titans stay at 35, which position do you think they take at number 35?
Well, it's going to be one of two, and it's hard to say exactly which position because you don't know who's going to be on the board. But if they stick at 35, it's going to either be a receiver or it's going to be an edge rusher, right? A pass rusher. But there's always that chance that, that projected top 20 pick tumbles out of the first round and that person is there at 35, and you look at your board and you're like, well, and it's a position that you may not have expected them to pick, and they do it. But I really think it's going to be one of the two, pass rusher or pass catcher.
Now, TD, we had a conversation last week about, and I think one of the, it was either one of the callers or we were, Adam was reading an article by a writer about potential trades within the draft, and was talking about the Tennessee Titans and Jeffrey Simmons, the possibility of Jeffrey Simmons. Who was that was talking about the trade?
Sam Phelan of A to Z Sports wrote an article, Teron, looking at the defensive linemen that the Titans had in for their 30 visits, because there were some highly regarded defensive linemen who were brought in to visit Nashville, and wondered if that could mean some writing on the wall for Jeffrey Simmons.
Yeah, so we know that the Titans are not. It doesn't seem like they're going to do anything before the draft. But can you see a scenario let's just say this, under what scenario do you see a guy like Jeffrey Simmons? Because I can only imagine Darnell Wilson in his, in that office or in that war room, just standing on his chair saying, don't pull the trigger, do not trade him. But under what scenario can you see that possibly happen? Because he's probably the only guy on your team right now that can, get you more than a third round pick.
Yeah. So for me, and we talked about this morning on the Chase and Big Joe show. It would have to take like one of those deals that teams make for a quarterback. You know what I mean? Because here's the thing. Let's say you trade him for a first round pick. All right, cool. You get a first round pick. Guess what you hope the first round pick will do? Have an impact like Jeffrey Simmons. Why not just stick with what you have, and what you know is what it is, and I think, you look at him and you look at, draft currency is really good, but you draft prospects to become outstanding pros, which is what Jeffrey Simmons already is. So it would take a crazy offer. I know just from talking to people on both sides of the equation here, there isn't any, request or any desire to trade. So that's definitely a good thing, from a Titans perspective, from a Jeffrey Simmons perspective, and they just got to see how this thing plays out.
Now, it's with that second pick in the second round, if indeed, because listen, they're going to have to address the skill position somehow, some way, and they may have to do it in the second round. But say if that guy that they are looking at isn't there, say like a Luther Burden III, or the guy out of Ole Miss, or one of these other guys that are ranked up there. If one of those guys get drafted late in the first round, can you see them possibly going after a tight end then? Because listen, I understand people want wide receivers, and I understand why, but in today's football, if you can get that versatile tight end, that becomes just like a wide receiver in a sense.
Yeah, that one is really interesting to me, the tight end position, and it just seems like that keeps getting pushed. I still feel Chig Okonkwo is a very capable tight end, but I mean, if a guy like Colston Loveland is there at 35, you definitely got to think about it. You got to think about it. I mean, that's the number 2 tight end on most boards, to Tyler Warren. And some people have him even higher. But then again, I think at the same time, you also got to look at it like, okay, how much separation is there from Colston Loveland to like Elijah Arroyo, who was Cam Ward's tight end at Miami, right? Like, how much separation is there? How much separation is there from Loveland to Mason Taylor? You know what I mean? And so I think when you look at those things, you got to try to figure out, like, okay, is this enough of a difference for me to elevate that above the pass rusher that may be available, the receiver that may be available? And that's what you have to decide.
So do you think, with that being said, because you are right, because you don't have, multiple picks, or you don't have picks in every round, you have to be very calculated on what you're doing in regards to who you're getting. But does that make it even more imperative that somehow, some way, they find a way to get back into the third round?
You always want to get back into the third round anyway. It does increase it. But I mean, you look at some of the other guys, like, they've done a lot of work on Ferguson, you know what I mean? And he's a guy that probably with one of your later of the fourth round picks, or even a fifth round pick, you could probably get a guy like that. You look at, Rodney Gadsden Jr., right? I remember watching him at the Shrine practices, and this guy was pretty good, and he's a matchup problem. So, again, it goes back to how do you foresee the rest of the draft going, and that will really dictate whether or not you got to move into the third round for a tight end. And I think that's really the way to look at it.
Teron Davenport is with us. Teron, just a quick timeout to salute our New York Mets. 4-game sweep over the Cardinals. Did you get a kick out of my text to our former colleague and big Cardinal fan, Caroline Fenton?
Yeah, I loved it, man. It was really funny. I had tickets to that the April 17th game. I sold them instead of going, man.
Well, that's all right. The season is young. Knock on wood. So far, so good. But it is fun to sweep the Cardinals, who refer to Mets fans and Mets players as pond scum. So we had a little fun at Caroline's expense. First time they've swept pond scum. That's what Mets fans are known as in the city of St. Louis.
Video where he was walking, and ironically, Strawberry lives in St. Louis now.
Is that right? Oh man, of all cities, that's funny. So Teron, you referenced this earlier, right at the start of the interview, and you said that the Titans are turning down trades for the first pick. Is that because nobody's really come to the table with anything that is worth their time, or do you think that it just shows the conviction in Cam Ward?
Yeah, I think that's really the bigger question within the question is, okay, which one is it? Like, why are you turning down offers? And I don't know, honestly. I don't know. I know there were some things swirling around about the Giants and the Giants making a decent offer to move up to 1. I don't know though, and I think that's really that's something I'm going to try to unearth tomorrow. Like we got them at 1 p.m. You know, Chad Brinker, Mike Borgonzi, as well as Brian Callahan, and that'll be a good question for tomorrow.
So the central question that we were kicking around in the first hour of our show was, if you believe across the board that when you look at everybody's regular board, that Cam Ward is somewhere between 6, 12, 15 in some cases on the low end, but most people don't have him as the top talent in this draft. But because he's playing quarterback, that obviously you called it the quarterback tax. That was the term used. I think that's apropos. But the question I had, which I thought was an interesting one that D-Mace answered, was if you were at TD, let's say you asked Mike Borgonzi the day after the draft and said, was Cam Ward your first player on your board, or was he the player taken because he's a quarterback? D-Mace argues that you cannot say that, hey, he was 6th on our overall board, but because he's a quarterback, we thought this was the right time to take him here. D-Mace says you cannot do that. But what's the answer in your mind?
I mean, I think there's an understanding that there is that quarterback tax, and he may not be the number 1 prospect. I mean, I would imagine that Travis Hunter is the top prospect on most boards, but Ward is the top prospect. I would say this, Borgonzi, if I were to speak for him or like try to figure out what he's thinking, it would be this. Ward is the highest rated player that matches our highest need, right?
Yes.
And so I think that's why it's just an instant marriage. He and the Titans at the top of the draft. They need a quarterback. He's the best quarterback in this class, and boom, there it is.
We all agreed you'd have to massage your wording there.
Yeah, it's you're basing your draft on your needs. So you've had time to evaluate or self-scout yourself. Can't use self twice. Well, self-scout. And you've determined that our big board should look like this because of our scouting of ourselves. So yeah, y'all may have them, all 31 of y'all may have them, you know, at least a top 8, but we have him number 1 on our board based upon our needs.
And I think, TD, that's where it's, if they follow through with what we all believe they're probably going to do, and that's take Cam Ward, carrying that weight of being the first overall pick when everybody knows the label and the storyline. The storyline, the best human interest story, the minute he's picked, is a great story. That here's a guy that was not recruited out of high school. That's
zero-star recruit.
Zero-star recruit. First pick in the draft. That's a great story. But from that moment on, all the Titans fans aren't going to worry about all that. They're like, hey, he's the first pick in the draft. There's a certain expectation level that goes with that. That's going to be what carries. That's going to be what he carries with him.
Yeah, and that's fine. And I tell you, from the people that I've talked to, he's built for that. Really, that's really what it has come down to from conversations I've had. And I mean, we're talking about a guy who was, as you said, a zero-star recruit going to Incarnate Word, and his dad is like, hey, you know, it'll be cool if you get to play. He's like, Pops, no, I'm going to start. You know what I mean? And his dad is trying to reel that in, and guess what he does? He goes out there and starts. You know what I mean? Over a guy who was already there as the quarterback. So I don't think this is anything new to Cam Ward, right? I think he's continued to project, hey, look, man, this is what I'm going to do, and he's gone through and done it. I know in talking to Xavier Restrepo last week for talking with TD, I mean, the guy told me, he said he's never seen somebody be able to come in and captivate and turn a building around in 8 months the way Cam Ward does. And I think that's something. Talking to Daryl Colbert Jr., his QB coach, you know, he said they go back to Miami for the pro day, and he had to wait for Cam because Cam was going through and, you know, greeting us, shaking hands and giving hugs to everybody, including just, you know, random people there, you know, ball boys, whatever. And I think when you have a person like that, you understand the moment and you just continue to rise to it. I think from talking to the people that I've spoken to, Ward is very capable of doing that.
Teron, before we let you go, let's discuss one other quarterback in this draft, Shedeur Sanders. a lot of conjecture about the fate of Shedeur Sanders in this draft. Where do you think he ends up, and what do you make of the rise and fall of Shedeur Sanders in the draft discussion over the past couple of months?
Here's the thing, and we just see it way too much, where you have people just regurgitate stuff that they hear without even watching. If you watch Shedeur Sanders play, you're going to say, man, this guy's actually a pretty good quarterback. So it's just the rise and fall in draft media or draft Twitter or however you want to. A lot of these are people that didn't watch him, and they're just kind of riding the wave and like I said, repeating what they heard. But I think, if you look within the league, the Giants have obviously done extensive work on him. But I don't, the Saints, the Steelers, those are all teams that I think will be, very much in contention to select him. And if he does fall, better for him, right? You're in a better situation. So, end of the day, I think he's going to be a good NFL quarterback.
Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, host of the Talking with TD podcast, fill-in host for Chase and Big Joe, and noted Mets fan. Did I get it all?
You almost did. Tomorrow night, there's an ESPN draft special. We got our NFL Nation mock draft. Make sure you guys tune in. I believe it's 6 p.m. Eastern time, but I'll be leading it off with the Cam Ward pick right from the pedestrian bridge. So check it out.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
Very nice.
I was just going to add all around good dude.
So we can
just
come
like-
down to the
That's
pedestrian bridge.
What's that?
So can we come down to the pedestrian bridge? Can we
Oh,
be
no,
over there?
it's already recorded. and
Oh,
done.
dang it. Dang it.
I would never tell anybody where I'm going to be. No, sir.
Teron
Especially where
Davenport.
that pedestrian bridge is. I mean, if
Exactly.
the wrong people, there's a lot that could go wrong on that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I ain't trying to go swimming against my
That's
will.
right. No, none of us are.
Multi-hyphenate Teron Davenport joining us on the program. Great stuff, TD. We'll talk next week.
All right, for sure. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
Of course. 615-737-1025. Again, a reminder that our NFL draft coverage live from Twin Peaks in Madison on Thursday, starting at 6 o'clock. Jared Stillman, Derek Mason, Chris Sanders, and Trevor Maddich. Friday at 6 o'clock from Boombaz in East Nashville with Chase McCabe, Joe Rexroad, and Chris Sanders. 615-737-1025. Let's talk about Nico Iamaleava because he officially has a new home. We'll discuss that coming up next. Willie Darnick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
All right, let's talk Loan Pronto. They are ready to serve you when it comes to needs for cash to get into a better, quicker financial stronghold. What am I talking about? Interest rates have gone down, and if you're a homeowner, you can use your home's equity to put yourself in a better spot. And it depends on what your needs are and how much money that you're looking for, but the average homeowner has thousands of dollars built up in home equity, and Loan Pronto can get you that money quick in a matter of days, and a lot of times without an appraisal. And it's a very simple process, digital process. There's a lot less hassle than there used to be. So if you're looking to get cash out of your home's equity, refinance out of a high rate, or do a home improvement project, Loan Pronto can make it happen fast. So call them right now and get more information. It all starts by getting into contact with the experts at Loan Pronto. The website is simple, loanpronto.com. That's loanpronto.com, or call 615-499-5780. That's 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781, subject to lender approval, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
D. Mace Finnegan and Donick 1025, 1063 the game. Nico Iamaleava, formerly of Tennessee, now officially transferring to UCLA. He writes on Instagram, among other things, quote, "My journey at UT has come to an end. This decision was incredibly difficult and truthfully not something I expected to make this soon. But I trust God's timing and I believe he's leading me where I need to be." According to Front Office Sports, the deal with UCLA is rumored to be in the $1.5 million range. So remember, he was making 2.5 with Tennessee, wanted 4. Now, according to Front Office Sports, he's making somewhere in the $1.5 million range with
And
UCLA.
we do talk about it at times. Tennessee doesn't have the same tax rate as California does. I don't know if-
California.
did anybody mention that when he was that brought up in the discussion? I don't know.
California has high taxes.
Oh,
yeah.
extremely high taxes. Are you
What?
kidding me?
I was being.
I remember
was
a couple
being,
summers ago. Remember D-Mace? We had that
tongue-in-cheek.
whole thing
Yes.
with
Oh, my goodness.
with Philip Forsberg. Oh,
Yes.
it's going to be the Kings. The Kings are going to offer him. I was like, okay. First of
get
all,
the
you got to
money.
beat the Predators, and then you got to consider the tax. It's not even. It's huge amount of money. So anyway,
So Nico
Nico's where he wants to be.
Iamaleava, he is off to UCLA, UCLA. So the question is, of course, what are the Volunteers going to do at quarterback? We read this report last week from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram that Tennessee offered TCU quarterback Josh Hoover roughly $1 million more than he's currently making at TCU. But Hoover rebuffed the Vols' advances. He did
rebuffed. Was he in the portal?
No, he was not.
He rebuffed from somebody's burner phone. Is that how that works? Like that would be tampering, wouldn't it?
So
It's not in the portal.
Tennessee reportedly offered TCU's quarterback a $1 million raise.
Right. I'm sure Tennessee's like, no, we didn't do that.
That wasn't
Oh, what
us.
are you, I don't. That's false report. We would never
Fake news. Fake
do anything
news.
like that. He's not in the
So,
portal.
Tennessee
You can
needs
contact somebody in the portal.
Tennessee needs the quarterback. Are they going to do what other teams do? Are they going to tamper? Now there was a report that, of course, now with Nico Iamaleava at UCLA, one of UCLA's quarterbacks is transferring out.
Well, he just transferred in.
Is it Joey
Yes.
Aguilar?
This
right?
guy Aguilar, who was the quarterback at App State,
Yes.
and a very good one, was granted in the Diego Pavia world of, because he was junior college,
Mhm.
the court victory that Diego had, which is allowing him to come back to Vanderbilt, is the same rule that allows this Aguilar to have another year of eligibility. So he said, all right, where can I go play? I'll transfer to UCLA.
Nothing like going from Boone, North Carolina to
Pasadena.
to Pasadena, California. Shout out
This
Boone,
is a
North Carolina.
Beautiful, beautiful campus for sure. So D-Mace, let's go back to our play acting
Yeah.
from last week, right? And so here's Mr. Aguilar. He goes, he leaves App State, he comes west, he
hops in
registered
his
for
he hops in
classes.
his Mazda and drives straight across
Hey,
the
drives
country.
across the country. He shows up, meets the
I
new
don't know if
coaching
he drives
staff.
a Mazda.
He
but-
gets his roommates. He's in the dorms. Spring semester starts. He's working his way up. Spring football starts. He wins the job. Mom, I won the job. I'm the quarterback at UCLA. And coach just told me, hey, Mr. Aguilar, great job. Great job. Now, what is that conversation like when this news story comes up?
My bad.
Hey,
Well-
coach, this is what's Aguilar's first name?
Joey.
Coach, this is Joey. I just read about Nico. Is that true?
Hi, Joey. Coach isn't in right now.
Could
can
you have
call
coach?
back?
Could you have coach call me? I just read the story. Nico is
Yeah.
coming to UCLA. That's not true, is it?
Nico. I don't know what Nico. Do you know what Nico?
Because I guarantee you,
Iamaleava, what?
I guarantee you, because this reminds me of, like, Aguilar. He coming from Boone. You know, it's just go ahead and play it. Go ahead and play it.
Joey.
Because this
He
is
could have been the guy.
he
He
got
could have
to
been.
go. But what did he do? Oh, get to me.
Yeah.
Move. California is where you want to be. So he loaded
Right.
up all his stuff
Boone,
from
North
Boone.
Carolina could
North
be
Carolina, went to California.
a beautiful place. It could be described as bucolic. That's a
Exactly.
great word to
So
describe Boone.
hey, he went to California like the Clampets. Thought he was gonna settle home. That was gonna be home. Lo and behold, somebody else was doing the same thing. And now you can't get in touch with coach.
Right.
Now-
So now this poor kid, after moving all of his stuff out there to California, going
Man.
through the blood, sweat, and tears, winning the job, now jumps back into the portal.
And guess which team is rumored to be interested in his services?
Well,
the University of Tennessee.
pack up your bags.
We might as well make a trade.
now
We might as well just make a
imagine
trade.
if that's what happens. It could, because
Essentially, that's what's
he is
happening.
in the portal, right? He's
Does he
calling-
move into Nico's old apartment?
possibly.
Mm.
They could call each other.
Do we
Hey,
get-
Nico, here's where I was staying on campus. I
get
got a
Nico's
lease that
old
goes
car?
through the end of the semester. You want to stay in my place?
Sublease it.
And he'll say, well, I actually had a place in Knoxville. You want to, why don't we just, let's talk. Let's do the paperwork.
Hey, subleasing. That's what they're doing now.
If I
right.
remember
Nothing wrong with that.
correctly,
Sublet.
several years ago when the Predators traded Seth Jones for Ryan Johansson, they ran into each other at the airport.
Right.
Took a picture. and
When
I
they were
belie-
going to their new
Yes,
homes.
and I believe Ryan Johansson lived, lived at Seth Jones's apartment when he first got here, if I recall correctly. I may not be remembering.
I don't rember that. Maybe. It's possible.
But it happens in pro sports when
Oh, of
players
course.
get traded.
Right.
They live.
It
in
happened-
They
somebody
live in
else's house.
somebody's house.
It
Yeah.
happened to me.
So it
That-
might. Yeah, go ahead.
No, that happened to me. It wasn't a player, it was a coach. So I get cut. That had they hired Norm Child, and I'm going through the airport. Oh, Norm Child and I run to each other. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, they got rid of my best wide receiver. See you later. I was going one way. He was, and that's what he said. He said,
Yeah.
they got rid of my best. I take the job, they get rid of my best wide receiver.
Jeez.
So.
But this is the thing. We laugh about it, but these are real lives. This is somebody's life that he's doing. This is, I guess, what it is now. I just think that is a messed up system when you have that situation happen. And he could have stayed,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Joey could have stayed at UCLA and said, you know what? I'm going to dig in. I'm going to beat out Nico. But I think he knows he's got no shot.
He
Money
announced
wins.
his
For them to go
commitment.
into this and grab Nico, he knows he will not be the quarterback.
So Joey Aguilar announced his commitment to UCLA in late December. He is also a native of California.
Mm.
So
So now he's coming back.
he's
and
coming
looking
back
for
east.
a new job. Well, we don't know. I mean, I'm sure App State's going, hey, Joey, you did pretty well here. And he did. He did very, very well as I think a 2-year starter for App State, which is a good,
Yeah.
solid,
Program.
I guess what you would call a mid-major program.
He
right?
threw
They've
for
done well.
6,760 yards and 56 touchdowns in 2 years with the Mountaineers. He previously spent 2 seasons at Diablo Valley Community College. I like the name of that.
So he would be a
Diablo
little more
Valley.
of a Diego Pavia move up the ranks slow.
Yes.
And so the question would be, is he better than everybody else in the portal? If you look at the Athletic, and I think it's Go Vols 24/7. They did a long list of players, quarterbacks in the portal right now, and it's a hodgepodge of guys who are looking for something, who are not clear-cut high-end starters.
There was a quarterback from Notre Dame in there.
Right. The backup, if you might remember Notre Dame's victory over Penn State, the backup came in when it looked like Riley Leonard was knocked from the game. And Leonard returned later, and a lot of people were going, is he not concussed? Should he be back in there? But he came back in there. But in the meantime, this kid did a nice job at the end of the first half and kept them afloat, led them to a field goal. He looked okay. Is that an upgrade for Tennessee? These are the things that they've got to determine if they can't, quote, pluck somebody off of somebody's roster who is not currently in the portal, a.k.a. tamper.
But as that report from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram said, Tennessee apparently willing to shell out some money to convince a quarterback who might not be in the portal to come play for the Volunteers.
But do we not feel for Aguilar a little bit?
Yeah,
Or is
you
that
gotta-
just, hey, man, if you play for the money, you play college football, this is what you get?
one
I
texter
just- I don't
says
like
it's a
that.
dog-eat-dog world. We're all
Right.
replaceable.
I don't like that.
Yeah, well, that's college sports. That's how it is. You know, it's it may be your job today, but it may not be your job tomorrow.
Trey is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Trey, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Hey, how y'all doing today?
Good.
Doing good, Trey.
Hey, I just want to say, I think that was kind of a stupid decision. For number one, the Volunteers was on TV. That costs money. You know, the exposure costs money. You know, he's going out there, high taxes. I believe that if he would have asked Coach, hey man, let me throw me a little something, Coach probably would have did it. But why did he have to broadcast, all that? He could have kept that in-house. I think he probably ruined his career, as far as visibility goes. But y'all have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks, Trey.
That is a question. Is how will this work out?
Yeah,
for
for
Nico?
him. Yeah, moving forward. Listen,
Well, it kind
I-
of goes back. I'm sorry, Derek. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Cam Ward at the beginning of the show about the media market. Now, Los Angeles is a huge media market, but UCLA football doesn't have anywhere near the same footprint as SEC football. So going from Knoxville to Los Angeles, there's more exposure, but he's going to play for a lesser program and a lesser college football conference.
well, it boils down to, listen, and we had this discussion last week. Will he suffer from this moving forward? Will this come back to ultimately, haunt him as he starts to prepare himself for the NFL? Because ultimately, this is what this is about. And I thought, like I said, I think it was a little bit about the money, but then about the system. So he goes to UCLA. So my thing is, if he performs at UCLA, everybody forgets what happened. UCLA fans are happy he's there. NFL scouts see the development in him. Again, they'll talk behind closed doors and figure out what really went on, and as they piece it all together. But the only thing that matters, and I'm talking answering Strake's question, only thing that matters, is what he does once he gets to UCLA. Because if he goes there and he's just okay, then listen, that's will always follow him. That's always going to be the talk. But if he goes there and he lights it up, the talks of him leaving UT will be far and few between.
615-737-1025. Joey from Bellevue says, Adam, a lesser conference? The national championships are from the Big Ten.
Yeah,
Okay.
man, come on now.
That-
last 2 years. Come on, man. Don't.
All right.
Don't disrespect. Put
Yeah.
some spec on it, man.
I
Put some spec on
I
acknowledge
was
it,
wondering
my
if that was just going to fly over G
Exactly.
Mace's head and no
I
comment.
I
made. I was like, wait a
acknowledge-
minute. Where's the Big Ten pride?
I acknowledge that error. My general point was that although Los Angeles is a bigger market than Knoxville, UCLA is not a premier college football program the way that many teams in the SEC are.
You
But
see the SEC.
I regret that error.
Yeah, you see the SEC now all of a sudden want to claim basketball because they didn't won. They won a championship. Now all of a sudden, which they was great this year. I can't lie about that. But now all of a sudden, it's the greatest basketball conference ever. Well, y'all ain't saying that about the Big Ten, and they
When
just
was the
won
last time the
back-
Big Ten's won a
a
national
back-to-back.
championship
In basketball,
in basketball?
25 years.
I think it's Spartans.
Yeah, it was 25 years ago when
yeah.
the Spartans won in
Spartans,
2000.
Yeah, when the Spartans won, but we're still more superior.
They have not won a national title since then.
Yeah, Big Ten. We've been
Big
there.
Ten
a
has
lot
not
of
won.
finals,
We've
a lot
been,
of
yeah, a lot of
a lot
finals,
of Final
everything,
Fours,
yeah,
not a championship.
but not
Wow.
a championship. But we could say that same thing about football if that's the case. Because even though I'm not going to count the first one, I'm going to count this one that Ohio State won. I'm not counting the one last year.
615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts on Nico Iamaleava headed west to UCLA. We'll wrap up the show. Coming up next, Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, The Game. D. Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Stillman and Company is coming up next. We would normally be joined by Jared as we transition from one show to the next, but little baby boy had a pediatrician appointment today that ran late. We can all relate.
Oh, yes.
Pediatricians run on their own time, as do most doctors. But we need them in our lives, so no fault of Jared's. So Jared will be on at 2:00. So I stumbled across this story on CBS Sports. I thought this would be a fun little exercise to do at the end of the show. Predicting the landing spots for the top 10 quarterbacks in this year's class. Because, of course, the quarterbacks are of high interest. So no surprise, Cam Ward to the Titans. No shock there. Shedeur Sanders to the Saints at 9. That is a popular pick. The Saints have been the betting favorite to land Shedeur Sanders, even before all of the injury stuff came out with Derek Carr and his injured shoulder. So CBS predicts Shedeur Sanders to the Saints. Jackson Dart going number 21 overall to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Tyler Shuck going number 33 in the second round to the Cleveland Browns. Jalen Milroe, second round pick, number 42 overall to the New York Jets. Will Howard in the third round to the Colts. Kyle McCord in the third round to the Rams. Quinn Ewers in the fourth round to the Raiders. Dylan Gabriel in the fourth round to the Dolphins. And Riley Leonard in the fifth round to the Giants. Any of those potential fits intrigue you, gentlemen?
Say that again. I was just coming in.
Yeah.
On the
Ward to the Titans. No
okay.
shock.
Yeah, no shock.
Well, the key question will be, do the Saints take Sanders?
Mm-hmm.
Or if they don't, does that bump everybody down on that list? Because Dart, as a first rounder, would be the classic. He's a quarterback. He creeps up. No matter how many articles are written, this isn't a great quarterback class. The quarterbacks, more often than not, tend to climb the boards. But the opposite can happen too. Remember, Aaron Rodgers famously fell down. It looked like Alex Smith and Aaron Rodgers all those years ago were going to be 1-2. Alex Smith went 1. This is another example of quarterbacks taken with the first overall pick can fall all the way through the spectrum from Hall of Famer to total bust and everything in between. And Alex Smith would be right in the middle. But Aaron Rodgers, the Hall of Famer, went way down the board. And we know where he went.
So Sanders to the Saints. These are predictions, by the way, from CBS Sports. Sanders to the Saints. Dart to the Steelers in the first round. Tyler Shuck to the Browns in the second round. Jalen Milroe to the Jets in the second round. Will Howard to the Colts in the third round. Kyle McCord to the Rams in the third round. Quinn Ewers to the Raiders in the fourth round. Dylan Gabriel to the Dolphins in the fourth round. Riley Leonard to the Giants in the fifth round.
All right, D-Base, let's start with this. Let's say the Steelers are, they just don't want to bring in the Aaron Rodgers world. They've vetted it. They've had the conversations. Aaron Rodgers has got his whole list of things that he would like. And, do you want to play football? I'm interested. And they were just like, no, that's not the answer we want to hear. We're moving on. We're the Steelers. And Jackson Dart and Mason Rudolph are their quarterbacks. What does that look like if you're the Steelers?
I think you're looking at this to be a run.
I'm not missing anybody, right?
No,
they don't have Terry Bradshaw on the roster or Mark Malone or Bubby Brister.
At this moment,
Neil
Mason
O'Donnell.
Rudolph is in line to be the starting quarterback.
Yeah, so I just look at it from that's not a if those are my two quarterbacks, then
Dart and Rudolph,
then I better make sure I got a damn good defense and a really good running game. Now, what works in Pittsburgh's favor at the moment, they have DK Metcalf and they have
George
Pickens at the moment. Now, there's been rumors about Pickens, potentially being traded during the draft. But at the moment, you have a wide receiver tandem based on productivity and based on ceiling. They just might be a top 2 or 3 as far as the potential in the National Football League. If you're talking about 2 wide receivers together as a tandem, yeah, they could give any wide receiver tandem a run for their money. So that works in their favor. But even with that, I mean, if those are your 2 options, you better have a really good defense. Listen, let's just stick with Pittsburgh for a second.
Because there is another quarterback on here that I want to talk about.
Here is it doesn't. I think Shedeur Sanders to Pittsburgh would be an odd one for this reason, and I don't know why many people aren't looking at it like this. The Pittsburgh Steelers' last true franchise quarterback, and I know why they, one of the reasons why they went and got him, because it's one of the reasons why Baltimore, got Joe. You need a quarterback that can throw through those elements. You need a quarterback that's big enough to play in that division.
You're referring to Roethlisberger.
Yeah, I'm referring to Roethlisberger, Ben Roethlisberger. And then the Baltimore Ravens going out and getting Joe Flacco in the first round some years later. Why? Joe, big frame, 6'5", can throw through anything. Needed some, things to develop, which they did. He ended up winning the Super Bowl, but he was the type of quarterback for that franchise.
And arm strength is not known to be one of Shedeur Sanders' strengths.
No. So you're putting him in a system. New Orleans is better for him.
He's in the dome.
He's in the dome. Absolutely. But when you're talking about Pittsburgh, because that weather starts to change very quickly in Pittsburgh, okay? And in every other place that you play to, Cleveland, Baltimore, weather changes. Cincinnati, weather changes, okay? So we need a quarterback. Exactly. We need a quarterback that can throw through
the
those
air
elements.
is much thinner in Boulder, Colorado.
Absolutely.
As I understand it.
Is Jackson Dart, along with all of these other attributes, is he a guy that can play in those type of elements? I don't know.
It's an interesting question. The quarterback marriage that CBS is projecting here that intrigues me is Will Howard to the Colts, because the Colts bring in Daniel Jones.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about having an open competition between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones for the number 1 spot. Why not throw Will Howard, a national champion, into that mix? I think that could be a really interesting.
What round would they project?
That 4th?
3rd round, pick number 80.
Round.
Whew, that's too high.
But would they even need to pick another quarterback there?
That's what I'm saying.
The write-up says, when it comes to the quarterback position, Indianapolis seems like a dark horse team to grab a quarterback in the first 2 days of the draft, which is why we have them taking Howard here. The Colts don't know who their starting quarterback is going to be in 2025.
But the theory is they're kind of souring on Richardson.
Right.
That would have to be part of the script there, right?
I would assume that's part of it, yes.
Boy, that is stunning.
Man, the whole coaching
at
staff
that
needs
point
to
already
be fired. If that is the case, then you need to fire everybody in that building, because you picked him 4th overall. And by year 2,
this would be year 3.
You're done.
This would be
with
year
him.
3.
Yeah, this would be year 3 coming. You're done with them, man. That's rough.
That would be really
have
good
not
news,
set
I
him
think,
up for
for
success.
the AFC South.
Yes.
If they already have scrapped the plan, what was he 3rd? Not 3rd. He was 4th overall.
4th
Yeah,
overall.
Yeah, if you're scrapping the plan right away, see that's what that is what I'm talking about. Even a market like Indianapolis, it still sort of flies beneath, sort of right beneath the radar or right on the radar. You just getting if Richardson was in New York, oh my goodness, you know how bad it would have been for him,
because it's such an easy second guess, because they knew when they drafted him he was young, he had not started a whole lot. So they should therefore be more patient,
exactly,
and not less patient.
They should have been patient.
I could see if it was a Hendon Hooker, there's been a few. Chris Weinke would be the extreme example of a guy comes in his mid-20s, right? Then I can say, look, we got to move fast. Either he's the guy or he's not the guy. Anthony Richardson's at this time, what is he? 20? Has he turned 24 yet?
I think he's 22, 23.
Like, he's younger than a lot of guys are when they come into the league.
Richardson is 22. He turns 23 in May.
He hasn't even turned 23.
Yeah.
And they're ready to move on. If that's the case, that's a pickle.
Whew.
Well, he was the opposite of Cam Ward in
Right.
the sense that Cam Ward had years and years of experience at college in college football. Anthony Richardson started 1 season, right, at Florida, and that was it.
So who's older? Richardson or Ward. I would guess they're roughly the same age, and one guy's in his
They
third year.
are 3 or 4 days apart.
3 or 4 days apart.
Cam Ward was born May 25th, 2002. May 25th, 2002. Oh boy, that makes me feel old.
They are 3 days apart.
3 days apart. Richardson is 3 days older than Ward.
Right. So Cam Ward is the age of a regular fifth-year senior. So he's not Hendon Hooker, who with the COVID thing I think he had already turned
30. No, I'm just playing.
not
I'm
quite
just
30,
playing.
but
I'm
I
just
think
playing.
he was 25.
Certainly feels that way.
And he had torn his ACL. So that was like,
Yeah.
wow, this guy is not even going to be in the plans until he's well into his mid-20s. As opposed to Richardson, who are like, hey, we can develop him. It's a classic what baseball scouts used to have to figure out is, do we draft a guy in college who's 21, but he's got to move up quicker and he's already been developed, as opposed to let's take a kid out of high school where we can mold him, we can develop him at a pace. That I think it's becoming a bigger question in football. I don't think it gets reported on that much.
We shall see. What we do know is that Chad Brinker, Mike Borgonzi, and Brian Callahan will address reporters tomorrow, I believe at 1:00.
I'm not looking for a lot of insight there. I don't think we.
But we'll play it.
But we'll play.
We'll sift through all of the coach speak and the GM speak and see if we can find anything there.
Can I, before D Mace gives us our punctuation as he always does at the end of the show?
Yes.
Let me just commend the Commodores, the Vandy boys,
Mhm.
Tim Corbin's crew, swept number 5 Georgia. Really, really big series win for them. Probably their biggest one in the last couple of years, because they're fighting are they still the national power that they have been for a long time? There's been a couple of people that say, oh, I don't know if Tim Corbin's still the guy. I don't know if they still. That was a good moment for them. And now where do they go from here? I don't know, but that was a big step forward, and we're still around. So congratulations to those guys.
Shout out to the Vandy boys. That'll do it for us today. Stillman and Company coming up next.
Be love on your people. Have a safe, blessed, and wonderful Monday. Peace.